All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We're looking forward to sharing a lot of information with you about e-bikes today. My name is Carol Bush. I'm the marketing manager here at Experience Plus, and I am joined by Maria Elena Price, co-owner of Experience Plus, and Igor Baccini, who is the Experience Plus fleet manager. He is joining us from Italy. So that's who you got with you today. And I just, before Emmy jumps into talking with us about e-bikes and Experience Plus, I want to give you a quick overview of what we will be covering today. Emmy is going to be introducing Experience Plus, who we are and what we do. She'll be also giving an e-bike overview of just how e-bikes have come into the company and um, how it's been evolving, how we've been evolving with them. And then she's going to pass it over to Igor, who's going to give us the rundown on bikes that we offer that are e-bikes, the differences between them, how they function, all that good stuff. You will meet the e-bikes, and then we're going to transition lastly into a Q&A session. We have grabbed a lot of questions people have given us in advance, and we've had a lot of feedback over the years. So we have um, a meaty Q&A that we've put together. We'll be kind of panel discussing that. And as you come up with questions, if you don't see them um, answered, you don't hear them being answered, by all means, please type your question into the chat and we will do our best to cover that. And so with that, Emmy, I hand it off to you.
Okay, well, thanks, Carol. I don't know I think if we're on time to want to keep moving forward. Let's see. I think many of you who are with us today probably know us, probably have traveled with us before. So we are a family-run company. We are based in Fort Collins, Colorado, and in Italy. We have two companies. My sister and I run the company. My parents started this company in 1972. And since then, we've seen a lot of changes in our world, from destinations that are interesting and most importantly, probably in bikes. And today we run trips in about 22 different countries, and we have um, about 170 different itineraries throughout those 20 countries. A lot of those itineraries are our short and our plus. In this case, that 170 number does count both the short and the plus as distinct ones. But basically, we are based in Colorado, but our home away from home is in Europe, where we run most of our trips. And then about 20 years ago, we started doing trips in Chile and Argentina as well. And then it expanded into Cuba. And every now and then we add on other countries that inspire us to go travel. So that's a little bit about us. If you have questions about other than e-bikes, please feel free to put them in later as we're moving forward. So because this is a webinar about e-bikes, I just thought I would give a little bit of a history on e-bikes. And Igor, please do jump in if there's anything that I say that is wrong. Igor has been with us for many years, has been with us this entire journey. He has helped us revamp our fleet. Actually, the first large bicycle fleet revamp that my sister and I did when we first bought the company from my parents in 2008 was switching all of our bikes to titanium bikes, all of our muscle bikes. And Igor was very much a participant in that. And then as e-bikes started to become more popular, and they started to become more popular in Europe actually, we began to dabble in them. And I had put here that we first got a mini fleet of e-bikes, probably, I think we had 3 or 4 in 2014. So that's about 11 years ago. And we did it just on request. We didn't put anywhere on our website that we had e-bikes. We just, if people asked if we had them, we said, yeah, we actually have a few and we can put them on tour. And I think from our records, we had 7 requests in 2014. And then in 2015, we already grew the fleet, I think, to another 6 or 8 bikes. But because of the limits and the number of bikes we had to limit the number of e-bikes we had on tour. We would only allow 2 bikes on e-bikes on tour, because that's what could fit on a hitch rack that we could put on a van. And as things move quickly, already in 2017, from my records, we took that limit off and we were already leasing more bikes. And so, because of the pace of change in technology, we actually, Igor was doing a lot of research and he ended up deciding it was best to lease bikes for those first few years because every year they changed pretty quickly and that gave us a little bit more flexibility. So we'd been leasing bikes for a number of years. That has changed off and on since then. We have leased, purchased in different ways. Um, but that's history because things move fast. And one thing that I think is just true in our world is that this has truly been what I would call a true technology disruptor in our space. The arrival of this new type of bike has changed a lot. There's so many pros and cons that I'm sure many of you have felt if you've been on tour, if you've ridden them. But overall, the net I think is positive. It gets more people out on bikes, but there are a lot of things to manage. And so one of the goals of this webinar was to kind of explain all of the pieces and then help everyone who are thinking about or who want to use e-bikes on tour to understand how those e-bikes affect equipment, tour and design, group dynamics, processes, and policies, because they affect a little bit of everything. On our end, the equipment piece is anywhere from our vans and our warehouse to the actual bike. Bikes are changing fast, but ultimately, if you think about it, we used to have a hybrid bike, a mixed drop frame bike, and a road bike in non-e-bikes, and now we basically have doubled the types of bikes we have. So instead of 3 bikes, we have 6 different types of bikes that Igor is managing. So in just a short 6 or 7 years, we've completely had to increase our inventory management by over 100%. Our trip and design logistics have changed slightly because we have now trailers we have to manage. E-bikes don't go on top of vans as easily as the non-e-bikes. In Italy, they're called muscular bikes. So every now and then I call them a muscular bike. Some people call them analog bikes, push bikes. There's lots of different terms for it in English. The group dynamics have changed, of course, on trip. I think for those of you who have traveled with EP, you know that we don't tend to ride as a group. So actually, in our world, the group dynamic during the day hasn't changed as much. I think because we have a very independent style of navigating during the day, it really does allow for everybody to go at their own pace. So there's not tension between e-bike riders and non-e-bike riders in a group ride setting. But I think there is still a little bit of tension, especially as you add new attitudes and behaviors on bikes. There still are some things that can be adapted to and managed. And our tour leaders certainly have noticed that on tour. And then, of course, in the processes and policies, we have new bike fitting requirements that Igor has supported and trained our tour leaders on. We have new equipment management on tour and off tour, and a lot of different aspects that have caused us to learn quickly as more and more of these bikes join our fleet. And of course, in all of this, we have to manage people's expectations. Our staff, our tour leaders, we have distinct conversations with people where it's like, oh, I'll never ride an e-bike, or I hate having e-bikes on tours, versus other people when they go on tour, they come back and they say, actually, that wasn't that bad. It was nice to see somebody who was able to ride maybe that previously hadn't felt like they could ride as much or as far. So I think we've seen those attitudes change drastically in the last 10 years for sure, and even just in the last 4 or 5 years. So speaking of, Igor, do you have anything to add on that piece, since you managed a lot of this change?
Yeah, no, it's been interesting to see all these changes and to keep up with the technology, because as you said, it changes constantly and it's still changing quite fast. So we're trying to keep up with it and to change and renovate our fleet constantly, and to
Right.
also test and experiment with new things, with new technology, new models, and so it's been an interesting journey for sure.
Yeah, that's great. So a little bit of stats for you, just because I think it's really interesting to see how much this has picked up. And we actually just calculated this post-COVID, but the new technology adoption has really sped up in the last few years. In 2022, 25% of our riders used and requested e-bikes, and then that has already grown almost exponentially in the last 3 years, just to 2025. We're not sure if we're going to hit 50% requests yet this year. I don't think so, but I have heard from other bike tour operators that they are already way past that. So maybe we will see. It's just something that, of course, this kind of usage and increase makes managing demand and the mix of our fleet part of the guessing game and the complication that we're always doing at this time of year as we predict what the future will look like in the next 12 months. So the stat is not surprising too much, I don't think, but it's a reality that I think we have all felt and that Igor has definitely felt. So it's good to see it in the numbers when we track it. And the last bit that I'm just from my overview perspective before we go into the nitty gritty about the types of bikes and kind of some information of what we have learned is big picture. We have found that as more e-bikes are used here at home, like I said, in the US or Australia or or Canada, where our travelers are coming from, more people are comfortable using them on tour. It was not rare that the first time people used e-bikes was on our tour, and from a management perspective, that is sometimes a little complicated because e-bikes are a different type of bike, and they take some practice getting used to. And so from our part, as more people ride them at home, it has been easier for people to then pick them up on tour. And I think that's one of the reasons we've had such a large increase in e-bike requests as well. We do love. We see one of the best pros is that e-bikes are a great equalizer. They can extend people's time biking. That comes with a little bit of an asterisk because we also have to make sure people are being safe since e-bikes are heavier and harder to manage. The balancing process needs to be just as strong as the pedal process. And then what the other thing we've found is that as people come back and ride e-bikes for the second or third time, there's a lot more comfort. But that first time on an e-bike, the learning curve is definitely steep. Already, when you go on one of our bike tours, you're riding a bike in a new place with new traffic patterns, with new and on itineraries and roads you don't know. So to add to it the fact that you're also on a bike that maybe might function differently, that just adds one more piece that's complicated. So we make sure and we try in our orientation talks and in our materials, and we're always trying to improve the documentation and information we can send to people. And we're all ears if anybody has advice on what more would help. We're trying to kind of beef up that portfolio and library. And then on our part, as we're making these plans, what we'll be talking about a lot in the next part of our this webinar is actually how do we balance out and what have we learned about the best bikes for battery range, for bike handling and design. And that's part of what's been changing so much in the past 10 years. The good news is it's becoming more in line, I think, with what demand is, and we're finding that the balance between range and weight and bike design is easing up a little bit. So yeah, we just wanted to kind of talk a little bit more about that. So that's my part. I will let Igor talk more about the technical pieces and explain the bikes that we have on tour before we go into Q&A.
All right. Thank you, Maria Elena. So I'd like to say that, first of all, the definition of these e-bikes that we're using on tour, in Europe, they're called pedelecs, which means pedal-assisted bikes, simply meaning that you need to pedal for the motor to assist you. And these bikes in Europe are classified as conventional bicycles. So you don't need a helmet, you don't need a license plate, while there are bikes that are defined as S-pedelecs, which are assisting up to 45 kilometers per hour, that require all the they require a proper motorcycle helmet, they require a license plate, and so it's not a moped, it's a bike that you need to pedal. There's no throttle on it, and that's basically the definition, and that's what it is. If you want to move to the next slide, Maria Elena or Carol, now we go to the presentation of each single bike. This one is, we call it e-hybrid bike. It's an aluminum bike with a standard flat handlebar, like mountain bike style handlebar, and standard trigger shifter. Also, the geometry it's a standard geometry, also called the double diamond or male geometry. All our bikes come, as you can see from the picture, comes even the e-bikes with two other battle cages. And specifically, all our hybrid bikes have a pretty powerful battery, which is 625 watts, which allows for a pretty wide range in terms of kilometer. It's a very comfortable bike, very stable. It has a long wheelbase, both in this standard geometry and the step through that we're seeing just after this slide. And the weight is about 55 pounds. So as Marina said, you have to be comfortable handling a bike that is a heavy bike. Once you start pedaling and riding, the motor is pushing you and you don't feel the weight that much. And obviously you feel it more when you're handling, when you're stopping, or when you have to push the bike. We're talking a little bit more about how to handle the weight and how to ride these bikes better later. The next type of bikes that we offer on tour, thanks Mariana, is another hybrid bike. This particular style comes with a step-through geometry. So as you can see, it makes it easier to mount and dismount on the frame because there's no top tube. The features are very similar to the other bike, to the other standard geometry bike. It also comes with a flat bar, standard trigger shifters, powerful battery, and I didn't talk about the motor, but the motor for all RE bikes is a 250 watt motor. So the power of the motor is the same for all of them. And that refers to all the different type of bikes we're talking about today. Even this one, the weight is about 55 pounds, including all the accessories that you see in the picture. So we also include the two other battle cages, the trunk bag, the seat bag, and of course the display, the lights, the fenders. So they are fully accessorized bikes. The third type of bike that we offer on tour we call them e-road bikes. We call them road bikes because they come with a turn down handlebar, and they are a sportier version compared to the e-trekking bikes. They are, in this case, they are carbon bikes, so they are lighter bikes, about 39 pounds. But in order to make them light, the power of the battery and the motor is reduced. So you cannot expect the range that you have on the other e-trekking bikes. In this case, we're talking about 50 miles, more or less, the range for this battery. Obviously, it's a more agile, it's a more sporty riding style compared to the other one. And ideally, you want to be used to that type of handlebar and position, more aggressive position at home if you select this type of bike for your tour. Yeah, that's about the e-bike or the different type of e-bikes. All these bikes come with displays on the handlebar. Here you can see in the picture the different type of display that we use in the three different style of bikes. On top, you can see the newer displays. You have all sort of information. You have the classical information that you can expect from a cyclometer, a bike cyclometer, plus, of course, more importantly, you have the range that is updated, in this case for Bosch, every 50 meters. So you see at a glance the number, the mileage that you can expect from the battery and what is left, the juice, let's say, that is left in the battery. As you can see, it's on the top left of the display. The bottom one is the display that is on the e-tracking bikes. It's a more simple one. They're all very intuitive and easy to use. The top one have a remote on the handlebar where you can scroll through the different modes in the display and you can see all the different information. While the bottom one, you have two buttons on the display itself to scroll through the different modes. So you have all the information at a glance. As I said, very, very easy to use, very intuitive. Um, yeah. What's next? What do we have next here with in our slides?
Well, I'm going to guide us into the next part of our conversation, which is now that you've seen the bikes and get a look at what they do. I think the what we learned is that uh, how you ride the bike is one of the most challenging aspects of people have experienced with using e-bikes on tour. Before we jump into these are the general topics that we'll be covering. Are e-bikes allowed on all tours? Is an e-bike right for you? We're going to talk a lot about bike handling, which includes some of the battery management, like how you make that battery last all day, and then what the future of our e-bike fleet is. There are a couple places you can drop your questions if we don't get to them. There's a chat, but there's also, you'll see a question mark icon. And I know we've got one question in there already. And so, Igor, I'm just going to have you field this really quickly. We have a question from Scott Nelson on how reliable or durable have we found e-bikes to be? And I think by that, I'm guessing is what's the longevity of an e-bike in our fleet? And then just however else you want to interpret that. And Scott, if you have any more specifics you want to type in the question about that, please feel free to do so.
So we have seen very few electronic issue with the e-bikes on tour. I remember the first one was as we introduced them, and but then after that, I would say that the Bosch motor and battery and system in general is very, very reliable with very few issues on tour. Uh, as for the longevity, we could keep the bikes for longer, but the reason why we change them mainly is to stay up with the technology. As Maria Elena said, these bikes are changing quickly. New technology is introduced basically every year. And the oldest bike we have in the fleet are the e-tracking bikes, the first two that we introduced, and those are in the third season of use, and they're still riding well. The motor Bosch claims has 40,000 kilometers in it, no problem. So you can ride for many years, and the battery is starting to decrease, let's say, in its capacity of holding charge after 70 full charges, um, which is a lot. Talking about full charges when you start from 0 to 100 completely. So we haven't seen in this 3 season any decrease in the capacity of the battery and in the range that you can expect on tour from each of these different models.
Okay,
I hope
great.
that
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you. So one of the things that I wanted to cover, we're getting some questions about just general how do things work on tour. So we'll leave a little bit of time to talk about that, but I wanted to cover that we on every tour page we provide a list of the bicycles that are available for use on that tour. So you scroll down and you can actually get to it on the right-hand side of the menu where it says bikes. You'll come down and you'll see all the bikes that are available. E-bikes are allowed on virtually all of our tours, except for some expeditions. So there's no, the route is the route. I know someone has asked about that. We don't separate e-bikes from muscle bikes in terms of what they're riding on the day. So there is a surcharge for e-bikes. It depends on the number of days that you will be using the bicycle, and those prices are listed on that summary on a tour page. So let's go to the
Can
next.
I'm gonna, can I just
Yeah.
add one more thing on that? So one clarification, we don't have e-bikes in Cuba right now due to the management of batteries, charging, and availability of e-bikes. We don't have that available on our tours in Cuba. And then I just wanted to build on Carol's point about during the tour and how we manage it en route. Because of the way, for those who haven't traveled with us, we, on many of our trips, we're either navigating with chalk arrows or with GPSs if you're on one of our explorer tours or in the UK expedition. And our style during the day is really to let people ride at their own pace. And so if you're traveling with somebody with an e-bike and you're not on an e-bike, that dynamic is between you two. But there is not a group dynamic need of needing to have to keep up with the group. And so we don't have a disparate uh, uh, group ride where some people are on e-bikes and some people are trying to keep up. And so therefore we've never seen in the 10 years we've now introduced e-bikes really too much of a discrepancy in that process. What we have needed to manage and what tour leaders are learning to do, what we're working together is how do you manage the expectations of support? Because we have, maybe there's more distance between the first people riding and the people who are not riding e-bikes. And so therefore, I think our tour leaders are getting better at saying, you know, you can expect support in this part of the ride or during this part, but they can't necessarily always be at the front or always at the very back. They're going to give support for as many people as possible. And especially if the e-riders are riding really fast, they might not need as much support, so they'll tend to hang back. So we're trying to manage and be there for everybody, but it is definitely one of the things that is part of our learning curve of trip management, but it has not been problematic from what we've seen. So it's just been an interesting part of adding this new vehicle to our fleet.
Hmm.
So what we wanted to do is give everybody a sense of kind of if you're starting from the beginning and you haven't used an e-bike on tour and you're contemplating whether or not this is something that I want to do, what's a good what are good questions to be asking yourself? And Igor and I have chatted a lot with tour leaders. We've gotten a lot of information from them. They are our eyes on tour. They see everything that's happening. And so we get a lot of feedback from tour leaders telling us about the some of the challenges that folks have had. And so we've been able to interpret some of those challenges into understanding there's a lot of education that we all need to be able to do to know if this is the right type for you. So, Igor, you mentioned that this question, am I up to the type of riding offered on this tour in terms of distance, elevation, and consecutive number of days on the bicycle? Is there anything more you want to add about this particular question and why you should be asking yourself that?
Well, it's like a self-assessment of of after you're checking the all the specifics of the tour to make sure that you're be able to do that. Of course, the e-bikes in general would help quite a bit, both in the distance, in reducing the effort, and but at the same time, you want to be able to stay on the bike for so many hours and to be able to ride consecutive days uh, with that mileage in mind. So I think that would be the first question to definitely to ask yourself and to decide if an e-bike is a good solution or a good addition or something that it's a good desire for you. And definitely, I would say if you are in doubt, I think you should go for the e-bike, because we should remember that the e-bike also has different assistance mode, so you can actually gauge how much you want to be assisted by the electric motor, and so if you want to put more or less effort, keeping in mind, of course, that there is a limitation, which is the range, that you have to be aware every time you're riding the bike during the day, and make sure you're going to be able to get to the destination with the battery and the motor that you have left, basically.
Yeah, when we talk to people, they call us and they inquire about using an e-bike, and we ask them, have you used one before? And so if they say no, and they're trying to decide whether or not to use one, we always highly suggest that you rent one. Rent one at home, and especially if you're interested in a hybrid or a step-through bike, those bikes are heavier, and the handling components, which we'll get to in a little bit, um, the difficulty of handling gets magnified by the weight. And so that's something that we highly, highly recommend, is to rent the type of e-bike that you want to use on tour. Um, the other question is, you're thinking about yourself, but you might also be thinking about your riding partner if someone's joining you on tour, and if they're not as strong as you, or if you're not as strong as them. An e-bike can, and as Emmy had mentioned earlier, it can kind of level the playing field. And so this is one way we've seen couples who have not really ridden before together at home be on tour, one of them on an e-bike and one without, and suddenly they're actually enjoying a day together and having an experience that they're just not used to having, but really loving it. So that's something that we really encourage you to think about, is how an e-bike can help you have a better experience on tour.
And I would also add on that in speaking to some people who maybe originally were thinking, oh, I'm not going to do an e-bike because I'm not there yet. It allowed them to do some more difficult tours maybe than what they could have done. But it also, one of the pieces of feedback that they were surprised was that they were able to get to the end of the day and then have the energy to go and explore the place that you're in. Because don't forget, we do this because we want to travel and see new places. And so if you're balancing out the difficulty of the trip, um, and able to still enjoy the place and go and do some sightseeing when you get in instead of being too tired, that would be one another reason to consider thinking about an e-bike.
So I'm jumping ahead. We're going to get back to the bike handling questions, but I thought it actually would be better for us to jump into the battery management um, of the e-bikes, because that's one of the biggest concerns that people have. And some of the questions that we're receiving is, do I get a new battery every day? If looking at the range of a bicycle, the longest day on my trip is 56 miles. If I run out of battery, can I change the battery? I think those are the main battery questions. But Igor, the top strategies for making the battery last as long as possible, they differ a little bit for, well, they're similar and different for the bike types that you're on, but I'd love for you to give us the rundown on how do you make the battery last as long as possible for these bicycles.
So there are several factors that affect the range in an e-bike, and that some of them are under our control and some not. Of course, the terrain, the wind, the weight, there's nothing we can do about them, basically. But what really is important in order to preserve the battery as much as possible is the riding style, uh, or basically the cadence, being able to anticipate the shifting to a lower gear when you see an uphill coming, being able to keep your cadence up, let's say over 70, between 70 and 90 RPM. It is very important to help not only the battery and the motor, but also your knees and your legs in order to keep your stamina up. We should keep in mind that the power of the motor itself is given by the torque multiplied by the cadence. So in order to release all the power of the motor, you wanna spin your legs, not faster than a standard bike, as fast as you would be using as when you're using a push bike. But what we've seen is that sometimes people get lazy on an e-bike and they forget to shift because they feel the power of the motor pushing for them, and so they yeah, they basically don't need to shift to a lower gear because the motor is pushing them up. By doing that, though, you are using much more power from the battery, and therefore you can run. You are limiting the battery range in general. So cadence is the most important one. Being able to shift, managing your shifting properly is the most important one. Of course, the assistance modes are important as well. There are generally 4 or 5, depending on the bike type. So if you keep the assistance mode to a more powerful one, in the Bosch case is called turbo, in the turbo mode, then of course you're draining the battery faster than for the other modes. So in general, you have to manage also the assistance mode and keep the more powerful one for the steeper climbs, for example, or for when you're really, really tired, maybe towards the end of the tour, of the day, I'm sorry. Uh, but I would insist that the cadence, our experience on tour is that the cadence is the most important one.
And I think what we find is that people up the assistance instead of downshifting, which is,
Mhm.
and so they'll go from eco to tour, or they'll up from eco to something else thinking, oh, I'm not feeling as much assistance. But when actually, if you downshift and you pedal faster, you'll actually get more power because you get more power the more you pedal. So it's somewhat counterintuitive, and that type of experience happens really just riding it a few days in a row and really feeling that out. Um, and so that's one of our main goals is kind of that education and support to make that learning curve, to flatten out that learning curve a little bit.
Igor, we have a
Yeah,
question. How variable is the assist? So I think you mentioned there are four
yeah.
assistance
There
mode.
are there are 4 assistance mode, and they assist you from 60% to 340%. So the turbo mode, let's say, what's the right term, magnifies your assistant, your pedal power by 340%. Um, and the scale is about, I don't remember exactly, but 60. Yeah, I don't remember exactly all the different the
Steps.
difference in the assistance mode, but that's the range from 60 to
Mm,
340%.
okay. And then do we have a speed limit on our bikes? And how does that compare to, say, other European bikes? Like, is there a limit that bikes are allowed to go?
Yeah, there is a speed limit. The motor stop assisting you at 25 kilometers per hour, which is 18 miles per hour, if I remember well. The uh, yeah. Um,
The
so
conversion.
I think the conversion exactly. I think there is a
Mhm.
difference between the Europe and the US. I think the US is 32 kilometers per hour, what they're called class one e-bikes.
Mhm.
But 25 kilometers per hour is actually a pretty good speed. And you have to keep in mind that what the e-bikes do for you is not really they make you go fast, a little bit faster in terms of speed, but especially is the average speed that is increasing quite a bit in general, because you can climb at over 10 kilometers per hour maybe, while on a push bike you would be well under 10 on a steep climb. So the average speed at the end of the day is much faster on an e-bike compared to a push bike. Then of course it depends on also on how strong of a rider you are.
So just a quick anecdote. I used an e-road bike on the Dordogne tour this last September. I had a hamstring injury I was recovering from, and I felt that using an e-road bike would just take a little bit of the stress off I was worried about putting on my body. I had along with me a friend who's a lifelong cyclist. She is an excellent rider, and I was really psyched to be able to hang with her. And I thought that e-bike would certainly on the uphills, I would pass her, and I really prefer to use the the lowest assist, just to give me that little bit of a boost because I know that that will get me through the whole day. I don't want to eat up the battery. For me, my challenge is to get back to or to get to the hotel with having used as little battery power as possible. That's the game that I play with myself. But on the flats and on the downhills, my friend pulled away from me and I could not keep up with her. And my experience was that a push bike actually is going to would have been way more fun for me. I would have been able to go faster on that if that's something that's an objective, and I'm not talking like racing fast, I'm just saying like keeping up with somebody that you ride with at home, I couldn't do it. So just, I don't know, Igor, if you have any, if that really correlates to what you were just talking about with the limitations on the speed of the bike, but that was my experience.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. If you ride with somebody who is a strong rider and he generally rides an average speed much higher than 25 kilometers per hour on the flat, like 30 or 35, then you won't see them on the flat. But generally, you keep up with them. You keep up with them when you start climbing because your average speed climbing is much faster, or at least as fast as them if they're very strong.
Mhm.
So we see that dynamic happening on tour all the time, especially with strong riders. Yes.
Okay. Can you explain a little bit more about just remind people why the road bike motor versus the weight and the motor of the bike on the e-road versus the e-hybrid. I know you talked about that a little bit before, but just
Yeah.
reiterating the correlation between weight and motor and the range.
Yeah, so there are two different motors. One is the Bosch CX version, which is dedicated to mountain bike riding or touring. And it's a very powerful motor with a high torque of 85 Newton meter. And it uses a little bit more power compared to the motor that is installed on the e-road bike, which is, yes, lighter. It is paired to a lighter bike, to a lighter battery, a 400 watt battery. So the difference really is in the weight. So you save about 2.5, 3 kilograms in the two systems. So the system on the e-road bike is about 3 kilogram lighter, but at the same time you have a motor that is not as powerful. So uh, in the e-road bike, even more so compared to what we were saying before, to release the full power of the motor, you wanna uh, uh, be riding in a sporty mode with a high cadence, and at the same time you don't have the same range. Uh, for now, the technology on the e-bike is like that. The compromise is you want to have less weight. In that case, you have less power, and you have a smaller battery, and that's what's happening in the difference here between the e-trekking bikes and the e-road bikes. Unfortunately, the e-road bikes have also a lighter frame because it's a carbon frame, uh, but the weight of the frame impacts very minimally in the total weight of the bike. Really, it's the motor and the battery that add weight on an e-bike, and all the cabling and the and the hardware to hold the battery and the motor in the frame. I
Great.
hope that, yeah.
Yeah, so let's apologize. I'm jumping ahead and going backwards. I don't mean to confuse anybody. My remote control advancing skills that I have on this is a new webinar platform for us, and we're like, I don't know how to use it. Anyway, let's talk about bike handling because that's just such a huge topic that folks really struggle with. And we've brought up weight a lot. We had one question: when you're going downhill, especially on sharper turns, how much does the added weight of the bike affect handling and speed? So, Igor, tell us more about how the weight affects handling and all the what are some of the tips and tricks that we are now passing on to folks so that they can either choose the right style of frame or just sort of know whether or not this is the right choice for them.
So really, when you start riding and you don't really feel the weight too much on an e-bike, it's like almost like a motorcycle. You know, a motorcycle is really heavy, but when you start riding it, the weight almost disappears. Uh, However, these are heavy bikes, so you feel that they're a little bit more cumbersome, not as sporty, not as light when you're steering. At the same time, though, they're very, very stable bikes because of the longer wheelbase, also because of the weight itself. Uh, the the assistance minimizes the impact of the weight in general. You feel the weight more when you are handling the bike and you're not riding. When you are basically taking the bike, I don't know, out of the garage or parking it or starting and stopping. We have to say that all these e-bikes come with a kickstand, so as soon as you get to a stop, then you can put the kickstand on. Especially with the step-through frame, you have a very easy way to mount and dismount on the bike, so you are very stable and you can put both feet on the ground as soon as you stop. When you start, even if it's a heavy bike, again, you have the push of the motor, the kick of the motor that helps you get a good momentum. And in general, as you get to the hotel or as you get to the stop, our tour leaders take responsibility of the bike. So you don't really have to manage the bike itself at the hotel, taking it on in and out of the garage, out of a ramp or stuff like that. So the way to handle that weight is to learn how to start and stop safely. Use the motor not in the highest assistant when you start because it really gives you a kick. And making sure that when you get to a stop, you can put both feet down and be stable when the bike is not, uh, when you're not riding, basically. I have to say that they have made a lot of advance in terms of how to manage the weight on a bike because of the proper weight distribution helps a lot. Now all these bikes are modern bikes with the motor is installed in the bottom bracket area, so the center of gravity is reduced and is very low, and the battery are in the down tube, so they help or not really reduce the weight, but you feel the weight less because the center of gravity is lower compared to the old school bikes that had the battery, for example, in the on the rear rack or the rear hub motors.
One of the questions or one of the bits of feedback that we've received from customers is that um, they should have had a step through when they got a top tube, and talk a little bit about uh, what are the advantages of one type of frame over the other, and when might you want one versus the other?
Yeah. So these e-bikes, the one with the step through or the one with the standard geometry, are basically the same. They come with the same motor, the same display, the same basically components. Really, the only difference is in the frame. So when you get a step through, uh, you have a very easy way of mounting and dismounting on the bikes. I think that if you're used to a standard frame at home, you can go with a standard frame on an e-bike as well. In any case, these bikes come with a very low standover height because of the top tube is very sloping. Um, But if you feel uncertain, and definitely if you ride a step through bike at home as well, then you should go with a step through. In generally, we keep an eye on that when we assign bikes for the tour to our travelers, and we make sure to, for example, people over a certain age have a step through frame because it's easier to handle in general. And in general, for male riders, they prefer a standard geometry frame, even though, I mean, step through can be used by male and female riders, no
Hmm.
problem. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
right. We have seen some men who are happier on a step through because of mobile hip flexibility issues and whatnot, and just because of the weight of the bike, the step through ends up being a little bit easier for people to mount and dismount. And so
Mhm.
that ends up being a consideration that you want to make, not just like whether or not the bike looks cool. It's more, is that going to work for your body and for your physical abilities? I'm getting several questions about maintenance on the road, flat repairs. How do we handle those? Are they different on e-bikes than whether it's the e-hybrid or the e-road than on our regular bikes? So if we can talk a little bit about what happens if you get a flat on tour.
Luckily, there are very few instances of flat tire on these bikes on tour because they come with very sturdy tires. But in case you have a flat on tour, if you are able to fix a flat tire on your own bike, most likely you're going to be able to do it on an e-bike as well. Uh, the real difference mainly is with the rear wheel because these bikes come with a 1 by 10 or 11 drivetrain style, and the rear derailleur is really positioned under the cassette. So in order to remove the rear wheel, you want to like sort of do a maneuver with the rear derailleur to get it out of the way to release the rear wheel, and because of the weight, it's a little bit more difficult. So generally, people that are not experienced or they prefer not to do it, they simply call us if they have a flat tire on the road, and then most of the time we are close enough, either with the bike or with the van, to come and assist you with that. But again, we have very very few instances of flat tire, both on the e-hybrid and the e-road bikes as well. Uh, Generally, e-bikes come with wider tires, and and so that also helps with preventing flats in general.
Great. There, we have a few folks out there who are on the shorter end of the spectrum, 5 foot or less. And are there any restrictions we have or heights that cannot be accommodated for on an e-bike, whether it's the e-road or an e-hybrid?
Yeah, there are more restrictions with the e-road compared to the e-hybrid. With the step-through frame on the e-hybrid, we can really accommodate even shorter people because
How
of the
short?
geometry. Now I have the measurements in
It's okay,
centimeter,
you can
but
give it
I
in
was
centimeters.
you can go down to 152 centimeter for sure
Okay,
on a e step through frame, while the e-road bikes, because of the top tube, of course, and because of the geometry in general, generally 157 is the shortest we can go. Um, we have had some riders shorter than that. We've tried to find a solution for them. Recently, we have installed like 27 and a half wheels on
mhm.
these e-road bikes in order to shorten the standover on the frame. And it worked pretty well. Uh, but the idea is that we should, it's not easy to find on the market e-road bikes that are that are small enough for shorter people. And even these Canon bikes we're using, they come with in a XS size, but that's the best they can do, 157 basically.
Igor, can you real quick mention we've been talking specifically about guided tours, but on a self-guided tour, if you were on an e-bike, a hybrid in particular, that had a flat, what kind of roadside assistance are folks able to get?
Uh, well, in that case, there is either us helping through the phone, people are calling us and we can help them there. Otherwise, we recommend, we have a good network of bike shops. Generally, they are close enough that they can come and help. Um, but yeah, in most of the cases, we're able to help them through the phone and to uh, get them to fix the flat on their e-bikes.
Okay.
Well, at the briefing on the self-guided tour, when the self-guided start, we give them very good instructions on how to do that. Um, the best techniques on how to remove the rear wheel in case of a flat, especially.
Great. I know there are several questions in the questions here that we haven't quite got to yet. Just gonna fire off real quick. Are we using tubeless tires?
No, we're not using tubeless
Okay.
tires on our bikes. They all come with tubes. We may move to tubeless tires in the future, but for now, mm, we prefer not to. Tubeless
Okay.
tires are a little messy. You need to replace the how do you call it, the liquid inside once a year, and then if you have a flat tire or if you have like a cut or something, they're really difficult to repair on the road.
Okay. So let's talk. We need to start wrapping things up here. The future of our e-bike fleet. What can you tell us about what we're going to start seeing in the future and what we're hoping to see?
Yeah, so one of the main feedback that we have received in general about e-bikes is, as you said, is the weight, and everybody would prefer to ride lighter e-bikes. And we can see that the industry is moving that direction. Now, basically, both the mountain bikes and the trekking bikes and the e-road bikes starting a little bit earlier, they're moving in the direction of having a sort of a lighter model, and then the standard full powered battery ones that are more or less the same weight, has been the same weight in the past 4 or 5 years. So we're already going in that direction with the e-road bikes, choosing the new Bosch system that is much lighter. As we said earlier, it's about 2.5, 3 kilograms lighter. And that is happening in the e-tracking, with the e-tracking style as well. We're actually already experimenting with that. We're getting some test bikes now and sending them on tour. It is always a compromise of weight versus range and power of the motor. Um, so if you're happy with a less powerful bike, but you prefer a sportier handling, then you can go with, for example, these new e-bikes that have a reduced range, but are yeah they are sportier for sure. They are so it really depends on the riding style again. But yeah, we're seeing that pattern happening in the industry, and we are moving with that as well.
As
Emmy,
as
do you
the
want?
management voice, what I'll remind people is that the change in fleet for us um, is not. Uh, we go slowly and we test certain bikes because we're having to manage the investment. I mean, the truth is these bikes are twice as expensive as our muscle bikes, and so when people ask about why we have a surcharge, the truth is that right now the way we plan our investments and are managing this and managing the cost is with that surcharge, just because purely the equipment is that much more expensive than our muscle bikes. Also, if you consider the fact that we have to add trailers and other logistical pieces become more complicated because of those bikes. So for now, we are maintaining our surcharge to cover the cost of this equipment as so that we aren't increasing the prices of our tours for everybody, since it is still a 50-50 split or a little bit less as to who's riding what type of bike. But the goal is to also have a more streamlined fleet that can balance out the needs of the different riding styles and also the demand. So we're managing all these variables throughout the year. And after COVID, as many of you know, there was, or during COVID, there was a big supply chain issue with even availability of bikes. That has changed in the past few years, if anybody is following bike retail. So we have been able to more rapidly actually switch out to a larger fleet of e-road bikes so that we could beef that bike up, that side of the fleet up. But now we want to be deliberate in the way we update the e-hybrid bikes to this new style. And it will probably be somewhere in between. It won't be as light as the e-roads, but it will be lighter than
Mhm.
what we have now is
Mhm.
where we'll land.
Yeah.
Um, and it will take a few years for us to do that. So pro tip to anybody who is on this call and is booking, you can put in a bike note and say, I would like this type of bike. And as we're testing them out, we'll do our best to,
Mhm.
Igor will do his best to assign those people. But remember that the riding style matters on the drainage of the battery.
Yeah.
So I want to just jump in real quick. We are at the end of our time that we said we would go. We still
Yep.
have a few things. If anybody is new to EP, you're not sure how our tours work, I'm happy to stay on this call a little bit longer. I want to make sure to respect everybody's time. This was the last slide we really had, but Igor, do you have anything else that you want to mention about the future of our e-bike fleet before we wrap things up?
I'm confident that in general e-bikes will become lighter for sure and more efficient, and because of that, there will be probably more and more people using them. And I think it's not a bad thing in general. As Mariana said, it's good to see more people on bikes in general, not only on our tours. I mean, people on bikes in general.
Mhm. Yep,
Yeah.
that brings up another pro tip for folks who are interested in touring in September. That is our high season, and that is when the majority of our e-bikes do get used. And so we highly encourage you to put your booking in as soon as you can so that you can be more guaranteed an e-bike. Sometimes we end up um, running short. We do all that we can to find e-bikes other places by renting them ourselves, but we do know that there's an inventory management challenge for us, so keep that in mind. And anything else about that that you want to mention?
No, I think that the other thing I would mention is that as we are, well, there's two things. So we are actively making a plan for the next few years on our e-bikes. So we have prepared a survey. So because you've been on this webinar, you will probably be receiving a survey from us about some of your inclinations as far as whether you would be more interested in a step-through frame or a lighter e-hybrid, because sometimes those are trade-offs right now in the bikes that we see being produced. So just we would love feedback. That really helps inform our planning. We take that information and put it into action. And then we had a little bit a note there about whether we are considering doing only e-bike departures and possibly non-e-bike departures. Um, and that is something that is still up in the air. So if people have strong opinions, we're also open to feedback on that. That is just as we understand how this new type of technology fits into our fleet. We're open to all ideas, but haven't felt the need to segregate yet in the way we manage our departures, and we feel pretty good about that for now. So that's kind of where we live right now.
And when it comes to some tour types like expeditions, and we're not allowing e-bikes on them, we say that with a caveat. We ran an expedition last summer on the Land's End of John O'Groats bike across Britain. We had so much interest, and we decided that we wanted to run that tour again and allow e-bikes. So we are allowing e-bikes on that expedition this year, but in general, we're not designing our trips, those expeditions. And a lot of that reason is because those days are longer and the range definitely becomes an issue with the e-bikes, and so that's a big challenge for us to manage. So as technology advances, it's hard to say though. Maybe things will shift for us, and we'll be able to offer those on expeditions. I want to say that if we didn't get to your question in the chat, please know that you can email me directly, carol@experienceplus.com, and I'm happy to answer those questions. And I have the record of everyone's questions here too, so I can reach out to you individually. I wanted to point out some e-bike resources we have on our website, all about e-bikes with experience with e-bike. There's an e-bike comparison chart. Wow, I put e-bikes twice, so that was confusing for my brain to read. This chart does a just side-by-side comparison of all the bikes. It just lists the specs. It's actually more of a graphic than it is a side-by-side comparison, but that'll help you see the differences in one glance between the bicycles. And then on our tour levels page, we have another chart that helps you identify the type of rider that you are and what type of tour level might be best for you. And the connection there with the e-bike, and it goes back to something Emmy said earlier, is that if you are thinking that this tour might be too difficult for you, we find that selecting an e-bike gives you sort of like, say it's a level 2, but or say it's a level 3 tour, but you think you can only ride a level 2. An e-bike might help you get to that level 3. Um, doesn't mean that you don't have to train. That's one of the things that we find people thinking that if they rent an e-bike, they don't have to train. That's not true. You should still be in excellent biking shape, and more importantly, time in the saddle is critical. If you haven't gotten on a bike, the next thing you find yourself on a tour and you're in the saddle day after day and you haven't trained for that, you will be uncomfortable. So that's just something to keep in mind, that the e-bike does not eliminate what you need to do in order to prepare for the tour.
It doesn't eliminate how your bottom feels after sitting on
No,
it.
your bottom is, yeah. So other information, we have a weekly e-blast that we send out that has, like, once a month we send out a recipe. We try to connect them with countries where we travel, but sometimes it's just at my whim because I love to cook and I'm interested in sharing meals that I have found to be very yummy and easy to cook. But we talk about new tours, we talk about events that are coming up. So if you'd like to join our weekly e-news list, please, you can do it from our homepage. You can download this QR code. And I think that is the last slide I have outside of thanking you for joining us. And I say email your questions to info at, you can do that, or you can use Carol, CAROL, at experienceplus.com. You can also, I don't know, Igor, I don't know if you want to
Yeah, yeah,
open
absolutely.
yourself up.
Yeah.
Okay. If you want
Igor,
to email,
IGOR at experienceplus.com.
yeah, you can email the man himself to get direct information.
Straight from the source.
And yeah, straight from the source. And if you, in the interest of time, if you are new to EP and you want to learn more about our touring style, we have all of that on our website. There's a section of our website called New to Experience Plus, and it explains a little bit about how we operate, but you can also look at the different tour styles page, and it tells you more about our navigational system with the arrows. You don't need to have a Garmin with you. We, on classic tours, we put chalk arrows down. We do use GPS systems or navigational systems on our gravel explorer tours and on expeditions, but otherwise it's not required. So with that, I thank you all so much for attending and all your great questions. I hope this was helpful. And we have recorded this session, so you will receive this automatically. And again, don't hesitate to reach out with your questions. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thanks for
everyone.
your time. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Bye bye.